Welcome back to the table and more of our On the Road to Gen Con coverage, and we're getting very close to Gen Con.
Very exciting.
The road is very short. It's like a runway that you're flying over too fast. Speaking of which, we're playing Sky Team today, or we just played Sky Team. This is a game that Nelson and I, by the way, it's Nelson. It's not Ryan. It's not Emily. We played Sky Team back at Gamma, right?
Yeah.
Both of us?
Yep.
This is a two-player, limited communication, and by limited I mean pretty limited, cooperative game where one of us is the pilot, one of us is the co-pilot, and we're effectively just trying to land a plane.
You make it sound so easy.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not easy, like a good co-op should be. In fact, we just played it again with this version. I think this is the final version of the game. This is going to be available for sale at Gen Con, and we were lucky enough to get a copy. But we crashed.
Yeah,
we did. We're doing pretty well for a while, but then...
It was the last round.
And this is just the scratching the surface. This is the sort of tutorial first scenario. Mm-hmm. And we're going to, in this video, share with you what that's like, but also some of the other things that are added that we didn't even know about at Gamma.
There's a lot. It's
we
cool.
went through it today, and there's a lot of oohing and ahhing going on. So what you have here on the table is the setup. This is going to be, we don't have the screens on the overhead, but each player has a player screen. We're going to be rolling dice behind that. It's a dice placement game, but we can't talk to each other about what dice we have. We can kind of vaguely discuss things beforehand, but once the dice are getting placed, that's it.
Yeah. And we're trying to manipulate every single aspect of flying this airplane. So we're trying to maintain the levelness of our wings. We're trying to maintain our speed. We don't want to come careening into these airplanes that are also in front of us coming into the airport. And so we have to radio ahead to place dice and then remove airplanes on that space from where your current position is. Remove those so you don't crash into them. And this is all going on without communication. And the only communication, which there is a lot of, is when and how you place your dice.
Exactly.
And that has been a lot of fun. And the two plays that I've never actually landed.
Yeah,
I will say that.
I haven't either. We are, to date, unsuccessful pilots. But what you're looking here on the player board here, you'll see some orange spaces and some blue. The blue is for the pilot, and one player plays the pilot. That was me in this case. And Nelson was playing the co-pilot. So there are a few spaces that you have to place during each round. Each player is going to, after they discuss, here's the general things we want to do. Hey, we're about to crash into planes. Let's remove them. Or, hey, our plane is about to barrel roll.
Yeah.
Maybe let's level it out a little bit. You can say stuff like that, but you can't say, hey, if someone gets a 6, put the 6 there.
Right.
Or anything like that. But then everyone rolls the dice behind the screen. And I have to say, Nelson, you pointed this out. These screens, super cool.
They're great.
They actually are like clamshells that kind of fit together, so that you can actually roll your dice into them, which I don't think I've ever seen before.
I haven't either.
It is brilliant for this game.
Very convenient.
But you roll your dice, and then all talking stops at that point. And then you're going to look at here. This is basically going to tick down every round. This is your altitude meter. And it also determines who's going to play first. In this case, the pilot goes first. So I simply take one of my die and place it into one of these many locations. You can see some of them don't require different values, but some of them require specific values. Some of them must be done in a certain order. We've got, as the pilot here, it's my job to make sure the gear is down before we land.
Yep.
It's generally a good idea.
Yes, most of the time. I'm opening flaps. I have more spaces to radio ahead because I have more time as the co-pilot because I'm not necessarily managing
thematic.
Yeah, really thematic. And then, honestly, this is my favorite part of the game, is keeping the plane level.
Yeah.
Because this is another one of the required spaces. If I place a dice here, and I think a 6 is kind of a bold placement here, because at the end of the round, after all 4 dice have been placed, you look at the delta between these two values. And so in this case, a 4 from the pilot, a 6 from the co-pilot, we would move this 2 spaces. Oh, no, 2 spaces this way.
Yeah.
And if we ever reach that X, we've gone too far into the barrel roll,
and you lose.
You just lose.
Yeah, like most good co-ops, and I've said this before, plenty of ways to lose.
Oh yeah,
one way to win.
One way to win.
Yeah, that is an interesting part. Down below that are a couple spaces that you also have to place every round, and this is going to control your speed. Your speed is going to relate to this dial right here as well, and this dictates how close you get to the airport, which is this other track right here. depending on your speed, if it's 1, which is in this sort of like middle area, you're just going to move 1 closer. If it's 2 and you're going too fast, it's going to move 2. You can actually go down here and not move forward. But the other thing that you have to pay attention to is you need to land and be at the airport at the same time. Again, generally a good idea if you're a pilot.
Yeah, I think we landed about 25 miles short or
We
so.
we did. That's what happened to us when we played. We landed a little bit before we got to the airport. Again, not a great idea.
Yeah, and the speed of which the plane moves, the 0, 1, or 2 spaces, all are dictated by how many of these flaps or brakes or what gears.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I open a flap, I move this orange marker up, and now it increases the range for moving 1 space, but decreases the range of moving 2 spaces. And again, if you change the gears and move those up, now it's just it changes your target value, which can be really fun.
And what's interesting about these target values, they're always kind of like that. You never want to just go, well, we always want to go as fast as we can. There's times where you want to go kind of slow, but there are also times if you've gone slow too long, okay, now we need to speed up. If you remember the last time you're on an airplane and they're landing, all of a sudden you'll hear the engines kick on.
Yep.
That's because they're going too slow. This recreates that situation. Yeah, like he said, he has the flaps, I have the gear. That's going to affect that. And then down here, these are the sort of the brakes. So this is really going to come into play mostly in the last round of the game.
Yeah.
Because as these get toggled, this marker is going to move up here, which dictates the speed with which we can hit the ground.
Yep.
So if we don't move any of these up, and this is the pilot's job, and it has to be done here, then here, then here. If we don't move any up, we have to be going extraordinarily slow.
I don't think you
when
can.
we land.
I think you have to move it up at least 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because if you, it's the summation of these
Oh,
dice.
that's true.
So the minimum value is 2. So if you only apply 1 brake, you have to both place a 1 here,
Gently floating down.
or else you go into the airport, which is typically a bad thing.
Yeah, so those are generally all the things. And the base game also has this coffee. You can go down here with any value and get coffee. These coffee things, as you can imagine for a pilot trying to stay awake, is going to let you concentrate a little bit better. So once the one's on the board, you can take it back off and use it to mitigate the dice, which you're going to want to do. The other way to mitigate dice are reroll tokens. And as you can see here on the altitude track, you're going to get a couple of those. And there's different scenarios, so you might be able to get more. When you get those, you have them over here ready to use. When you reroll, both players can reroll any number of their dice.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of those. There's not a lot of rerolling. So if he rolls a bunch of high dice and I roll a bunch of low dice, generally speaking, it's going to be a rough round because things might go awry.
Yep.
So the other, like this is the ooh and ah part.
Yeah.
The coolest part of this is all of the little modules that get added to this. And we're going to talk about all of them really quickly and one of them a little bit more quickly because this one, when we read about it, we were like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the first one I'm going to talk about is, they call it kerosene. Fuel is basically what it is. You add this fuel track to the side here. You start at the top. This is another dice location that you can place a die in. And when you place the die there, it's going to limit the amount of fuel you're spending that round.
Yes.
If you don't place a die there, you are going to lose 6 fuel. If you never place a die there, you'll probably crash at the end because you're out of fuel. So the idea here is if I placed a 6, that's probably not a smart placement, but a 1 is going to conserve a lot of fuel. So it's just another thing to add to the mix of what we have to worry about in this game.
Because it was going so well before.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the other ones that I thought was kind of interesting were these special powers. And based on the scenario that you pick, so this one specifically, you choose 2 of these special powers, and there's a plethora of these scenarios. And you get to choose these, and they modify the game. Some of them have different action spaces. Some of them are, if you place the same value of the dice on the axis, you get a free coffee token. And so it's just more ways to modify every single scenario. And what I think is cool is like this one specifically, all of these call out which modules to use, but it doesn't call out specifically which
of the cards
of the special cards you get to play. So you can even play it, lose. Let's try these special powers and see if that works better for us.
It's really cool. It just adds some flavor and some like uniqueness to each game for sure. And this game already has that quite in spades. But the other 2, and then we'll save the third for the last. We've got the ice breaks. This actually goes on the board right here and replaces the break situation, making it far more challenging for the players because before it was just up to the pilot to do that, to deal with the breaks. Now, in one round, someone has to place here and here. Now, the pilot has to do the top row, but someone, including the pilot, can place on the bottom row as well. You have to match those values in order to get that done.
Yep.
So this would be awful, but if I placed here and then no one ever, like you or I, didn't place
You're out
there,
of action.
or we didn't have another 2, we just burnt a dice.
Yep.
Very, very tricky. And then also we've got the tailwind that comes in. So the way this works, it basically relates your speed, which is usually a variable of the sum of these 2 dice right here, but it adds whatever the tailwind speed is to it, and that tailwind is affected by sort of the yaw or pitch of your plane here. So depending on how well you've done this, it's going to affect this, then this is going to affect this, basically making everything a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, and we had a hard enough time, like, just with the core game.
Yeah, we crashed in the core game.
But one of the things that I think and I project will happen with this game is the more you play it with anybody, specifically a group of people, if the 2 of us played again, I think we would do better.
Yes.
Because you always are learning, especially the other person, how they're placing and how you can communicate in these minute ways. Like, I'm going to place my 6 here, and that's going to tell you a little bit about my dice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is one of those games where, like, especially whoever acts first,
Yeah.
that's going to be a point of silent communication where you place a die and you're like, okay, I'm trying to send you a message here. This is as good as I get on this situation. Right. So just so we know what we're working with, you've got a 6 here. And by the way, 6 or a 1 on that in particular is tricky.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have any high die, we're flipping.
We could fix it with the intern.
Oh yeah, this is the cool part.
This is the cool one, yeah.
So this is the last module we want to talk about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. It's interns. So I'm going to start with the simple part of this first. It's another way to lose.
Yeah.
And we'll get to all the details in a second, but all the while you're doing this, you also have an intern on board that you're training, and you have to train that intern, because if you don't end up training that intern fully, you also lose. Nelson and I were talking while we played, though. That's probably an okay loss scenario compared to a plane crashing.
Yeah.
But yes, the intern not getting trained loses. But the way the intern works is really cool.
Yeah, so this is an additional dice placement spot. So I will place a die here, and then I will take the tag of the closest to my dice. So if I take this 2, the next time I would take the 5. Then this is a 2-value dice that I can place and use. And so I could place this here and open my flap using that. But we have to deplete these. I could use all the interns, I guess.
Yes.
You could use all of them.
Although you couldn't use them on 2 consecutive in one round.
Correct.
Right? That's interesting.
Yeah.
So we need to get rid of all these tokens. That is training the intern. But these tokens come out in a random order, and I'm working from this angle. So he took that one. My first one would necessarily have to be the 6.
Yeah.
But you can see how this offers some flexibility. Because at first we thought this, this kind of makes it a little easier. And it does, because it's like, well, I don't have a dice that works, but I can trade it in for this 6, worst case scenario.
Right.
But you have to do these things because you need to get this intern trained. And we haven't played with it yet, but I theorize that when it gets down to the last token, then it's like, well, you got to use that at the very first opportunity.
Yep. Someone's got to use
whenever we need a 1. Don't use your 1 die, just use the intern. And speaking of that, I couldn't place a 1 die here right now to take it. It has to be a value different than the token that you would next take, which is very interesting. I thought it was the funniest module.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of an intern effectively, also thematically, doing something to help on the plane. So like you're saying, I'm not going to be able to do this, you go do it. And the intern is going to do that. I don't know how much I'd want to actually do that on a real plane.
The in-flight training.
Funny enough, the intern doesn't get to drink coffee.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure that that's thematically accurate. Hopefully not. But you can't modify the intern tokens. But as you can see, there's a ton going on in this game. I genuinely think that if you're at Gen Con and you have any interest in this at all, get over there.
Yeah, it's fun.
Because I believe this thing is going to, and I don't intend this pun, fly off of their shelves.
Nice.
Seriously, I didn't intend that. But I do think this is going to sell out pretty quickly. It's also a pretty small box game. I don't know what the price point is on it, but this is not a high price point game, right? So this is going to be something that probably moves pretty quickly. And if you're in the market for a 2-player co-op, this is probably one of the most unique experiences I've played in a long time in that respect.
Yeah.
And so thematic.
So thematic. And I like it because it's very strategic, but you can probably knock out a game once you understand the rules in 20 to 25 minutes. And so it's one that you can replay multiple times. If you lose, you can modify and come back to the table. It's going to be one that it's going to get a lot of playtime.
And lots of difficulty levels too. We didn't even show you all the scenarios, but this was the basic scenario, and we had challenge with that. There are red ones, yellow ones that all suggest this one's hard.
Yeah.
Shorter runways, you're closer to the airport, all sorts of that.
You have to come in at a certain angle.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. But if you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.
See ya.